They call us a cult. But you know as well as I that New Trier is more like a family. We do all the normal things any family does. We try new foods together. We have parties. We even share our deepest secrets with each other. Seeing that it has come into vogue to spread slanderous lies about our family's activities at Facility Zero, about the Vita Carnis, and about our beloved father Simon Vanguard, I have been commissioned to arm you with the truth. I'll walk you through every secret hidden across 7 tapes. Facility Zero, New Beginnings, Revealed Progress, First Contact, Terminal Rally, Dire Measures, and Necrotic Wound, along with 7 additional hidden uploads most viewers have missed. Together, we'll construct a timeline so you can easily understand the story so far, and I'll give you my theories and predictions about where the story is headed next. If you haven't seen my first analysis of Vita Carnis, or if you need a refresher, please check it out with the link in the description before continuing. And please support Brother Quilloy by watching the tapes for yourself on his channel. My channel wouldn't be where it is today without Vita Carnis, so I'm excited to announce the Carrion Crow merch collaboration with Darian Quilloy, creator of Vita Carnis. Have you ever wanted a shirt featuring a bird that looks like it was cursed by the old great ones, then hit by a 2007 Ford Focus? Well, now you can! Brother Quilloy has reimagined Mudgeon as a part of the monstrously meaty world of Vita Carnis. With the link at the top of the description, you can find the adorable abomination on a comfy t-shirt, a hoodie dotted with eyes as a framed poster, or on all 3 as a discounted bundle. Each sale supports Darian and myself and helps us make the best content we can. Even if literally none of you buy it, I'm still happy I get to wear it. The Carrion Crow collection is only available for 3 weeks, so act fast to secure yours. Once again, use the link at the top of the description to check out the collaboration. Massive thanks to Darian Quilloy for bringing this idea to life, and with that, it's time to brave the bowels of Facility Zero. Wait, that sounds kind of gross. Facility Zero opens with a mission briefing courtesy of the Hateful Fools at Carcass, the anti-Vita Carnis organization first introduced to us in Message. We anticipated retaliation from Carcass, but never expected them to strike at our island home at Facility Zero. Carcass knew where to hit to make it hurt, but this wasn't just an attack, it was a heist. They planned to steal the crown jewel of the Vita Carnis, the Singularity. Carcass suspected it to be deep within Facility Zero, surrounded by the 7 monoliths and guarded by an army of harvesters and human security. They had no idea why we kept the Singularity locked up, and not knowing was what bothered them most of all. They sent 3 squads ashore in the dead of night to punch through our defenses. They conquered the darkness and crept to our doorstep past monoliths, harvesters, and humans alike. Mission support gave the green light to take the building, but teams were surprised to find its interior surprisingly quiet. That night, most of the building was completely empty. They knew we weren't lacking in numbers, so where was everyone? Yet more unknowns to haunt them. As the team pushed further into Facility Zero, the answer soon made itself known. As it turns out, that night was just as important for us as for Carcass. They ventured deep within the abandoned mall, but the more they explored, the less they seemed to find. Soon, there was only one place left to look, but as they neared Facility Zero's final room, the squads began to experience significant radio interference, losing contact with mission support entirely. Whatever they faced in the final room, they faced alone.
Alpha team in position. We are experiencing mechanical interference. Should we resume? Copy. Phase 3 is still a go. Preparing for breach.
Breach in 3, 2, 1. Breach.
This will go down as one of the most disastrous moments in our family's history, but the raid was, in some sense, a failure for Carcass as well. They learned only what we knew all along. The Singularity was only a singularity, one of 7. We weren't containing them, and we certainly weren't using them. We were serving them. Carcass came seeking answers, but left with 7 silent spherical gods and more questions than ever. Season 2 begins with a montage of broadcasts aired in the aftermath of the raid. For a secretive shadow organization, Carcass is surprisingly bad at the secretive part. Through standard news channels, we learn that Carcass apprehended many members of the family, including our leader, Father Simon Vanguard. They turned Father Vanguard over to the police, but the fate of our other family members remains a mystery. As mentioned in my last video, much of the body of the family was made up of the elites of society: world politicians, CEOs, military authority, Minecraft YouTubers. The media would make you believe that our cult was a collection of the individuals most apt to abuse their influence. I won't deny that we had powerful people in our ranks, but they were just looking out for ordinary folks like me. If they got to perform a shadowy ritual or two to make sure everyone can put food on the table, who am I to argue? Carcass accused Father Vanguard of a long list of crimes: murder, kidnapping, torture, ritual sacrifice. I'm kind of surprised ritual sacrifice is its own crime. I guess if you gotta sacrifice someone, just make sure it ain't part of no ritual. The final crime attributed to him was the use of chemical weaponry. This is referring to Neutrier's flavor enhancer, but what they call chemical weaponry, I call a good time. Anyway, this video has more to offer than anti-family propaganda. Having turned over their captives to the authorities, Carcass refocused their efforts towards research. Carcass HQ was a massive research outpost, custom-built to secure and contain the Vita Carnis to protect the public. It was equipped to study all 8 species of Vita Carnis, 7 species. They didn't have quite enough room to hold a monolith, so they stayed put. The full study of the singularities was led by the director of Carcass, Marshal Trados, who was unwilling to entrust the most esoteric Vita Carnis to anyone but himself. All 7 singularities are physically identical. Same size, same material, same ominous red glow, but these immediately apparent facts insufficiently satisfied Carcass's curiosities. They needed to know more. They needed to bring in Bessie. Bessie was one of Carcass's most respected researchers, but 24 hours alone with the singularities proved that Bessie was just a cow, not a scientist. Carcass promptly ended the experiment and cut her funding. Next, they wheeled in the body of a dead cow that doesn't even look that much like Bessie, actually. The experiment with Definitely Not Bessie plays out much differently than it did with Alive Bessie. In the presence of the singularity, the cow decayed at an utterly unnatural rate. As it rotted, it was transmuted into a thick mat of crawl, stretching up the walls of the enclosure. Researchers were baffled. This rewrote their entire understanding of VC ecology. Might the singularity be the source of all Vita Carnis, and the crawl merely a vehicle to spread more complex creations across the globe? Trados found the breakthrough exhilarating. This was why they had stormed Facility Zero. This was progress. Still, the crawl grew aggressively enough to breach the singularity's containment. The first rumors began to circulate that Carcass had bitten off more than they could chew, but surely, this was safer than leaving the singularities in the clutches of some cult, right? Carcass HQ wasn't solely built for the singularities, and the next portion of this tape comes from Dr. Rhodes Serres, a crawl specialist. Inspired by an incident in which wild crawl engulfed a radio tower, Serres grew 3 crawl samples in varying conditions: a control sample, a sample given extra nutrients, and a sample exposed to radio signals. Only the radio exposure sample behaved strangely, growing to the radio before returning to standard growth patterns. Oddly, Dr. Serres doesn't find this behavior notable, which means she either already knew about it, or she's just terrible at her job. I'm leaning towards the latter. Dr. Serres is chiefly concerned with the abnormal attributes of singularity-grown crawl. One difference is that the aberrant crawl rapidly produces nodules, the bulbous growths that bubble off and hatch into trimmings, meat snakes, mimics, and harvesters. So far, the crawl division has managed to grow and harvest 7 trimmings, 2 meat snakes, and even a mimic for other teams to use in their research. Even here, in the home of greatest hostility to the Vita Carnis, the crawl proves its usefulness. In a moment of radio interference, we see a commercial for compost made from crawl. Growing crawl for human consumption was under heavy regulations at the time, but if we can't eat the crawl, our plants sure can. Carcass wants you to believe that The family was all upper crust types, but telling starving people they aren't allowed to eat food you don't like sounds pretty elitist to me. Those of us living down here in the dirt understand. If there's a good meal on the table, any hungry family will eat. Doesn't matter if the government approves of the ingredients. The next section of the video focuses on trimmings. Dr. Fawn Penitra, Carcass's trimming specialist, has been studying the creepy little cutie's complex social structure.
Trimmings communicate through a series of vocal cues, squeaks and squeals. Trimmings also use some physical displays as well. For example, trimmings do a chewing or chatter motion with their mouths when they are happy or interested in something. They also are not afraid to show us when they are upset.
Researchers placed a single trimming into an enclosure with a speaker, a mechanism for releasing food, and a sprinkler. First, researchers played a soft, pleasant chime through the speaker, then released some food into the chamber. After a few repetitions, the trimming would respond to the chime regardless of whether food was administered or not. Likewise, they conditioned the trimming to respond to punishments, playing an unpleasant, buzzing alarm before dousing the beast with cold water from the sprinkler. Yeah, and these are supposed to be the good guys. Anything in the name of science, I guess. Just like with the positive reinforcement, the trimming soon learned to react to the buzzer without any additional stimulus. Now, you could do the same thing with any terrestrial animal, but here's where it gets weird. After the conditioned trimming was returned to its captive friends, researchers played the chime and buzzer for the entire colony. All of them responded as if they had been the one abused, proving that trimmings communicate at a level far beyond simple wildlife. They rapidly share complex ideas, learning not only as individuals, but sharing their experiences to grow as a group. It went further than that, however. On a whim, researchers replayed the sound cues for a group of wild trimmings. The results were virtually identical. The trimmings were communicating outside their colony by some immeasurable mechanism that the researchers could not know or control. Yet more questions about Carcass's ability to handle the situation arose. Due to radio interference at Carcass HQ, this tape is randomly intercut with a show called Magister's Wonders, an educational program in which this ghost thing called the Magister teaches kids about the natural world. New Beginnings ends with the Magister teaching us about the relationship between life and death. All life is a circle, you see. We live, we die, and we decay. Then that very decay nurtures new life to grow, consume, multiply, and eventually its rotting form will grow another. On and on. The circle, enduring, even as all else ends. New Beginnings leads us to the first hidden upload of Season 2. The title translates to Past Regrets Reaching Out. The video is short, silent, and the screen is mostly black, but a hidden message is shown very briefly. It says, "I think it's time I take you up on that deal. Things are changing, and not for the better. I will do what you ask. I'll start sending them over when I get the chance. B." We don't know enough yet to draw any conclusions from this document. Things are getting worse, but for who? For Carcass? The family? Someone else entirely? It all comes down to who B is, but with what we've seen so far, I can't even make a guess. Right now, we can't say who wrote it or why, but we do know when. It's dated from September 1994, more than 3 years after the latest research performed in New Beginnings. That suggests to me that these experiments persisted until at least 1994. I suppose their security was better than I'd like to give them credit for. Surprising, considering their attempts to contain some of the less stable specimens. Revealed Progress documents research on meat snakes and mimics, and I'd first like to examine Carcass's findings on meat snakes. This team is led by Dr. Azram Griffiths, meat snake specialist. They selected a meat snake, restrained it in an examination room, and started feeding it to encourage growth, never releasing it from its restraints. 19 days into the experiment, the meat snake began refusing food, so Carcass took to force feeding. its skin began to darken, and at 21 days, researchers cut their first skin sample from the meat snake. The flesh was functionally impervious to heat and cold, unless you've got some industrial welding equipment lying around. The upper limit of its resistance was around 5,000 degrees Celsius, a little over 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Before extensive testing could be performed, however, an unexpected development demanded the team's undivided attention. The meat snake escaped its restraints by way of a peculiarity of meat snake biology: their capability of performing mitosis. Their meat snake specimen had split itself into 2 meat snakes. Those who know their meat snake history will recognize some similarities to the massive meat snake specimen discovered in 1945. During World War II, our family restrained a meat snake in a subway. A tunnel, not the sandwich shop. They fed the meat snake bodies from a nearby battlefield and grew it large enough to block the tunnel before it mysteriously vanished. Carcass's testing makes me think the massive meat snake split apart to escape the subway, just as this one did to free itself from its restraints. Carcass wanted to reproduce our results, but their approach was imperfect. The major difference was food selection. Whereas Carcass fed their meat snake things like roadkill, the family was more selective for our sample's diet. Wild meat snakes may content themselves with whatever corpses they can find, but they can only stomach so many rotting raccoons or deer. For a meat snake to truly gorge itself, you've got to offer something tastier: humans. That's when you get something glorious: an elder variant. Due to yet more radio interference, this tape contains footage from a trimming pageant. Think of a dog show, but instead of dogs, they cart out a series of undercooked, uncomfortably moist, screaming hams. The crowned queen of the pageant is Patty, a trimming with a darkened body, pale face, and raised spines along her back. All the trappings of a man-eating elder. The next section of the tape introduces us to Dr. Farron Brones, the man in charge of the mimics. Farron's a little screwy, but he might just be Carcass's most passionate employee. His job mostly consists of sitting in the dark with a chain-link fence between himself and being cannibalized. I don't know how much they're paying him, but I know it's not enough. A later tape, Terminal Rally, shows the lengths to which he'll go to learn more about the mimics. He opens his log by discussing juvenile mimics. All these younger predators aren't ready to hunt humans, they're still feisty, as Farron puts it. Sometime after hatching, they find someplace safe and warm and surround themselves with a fleshy cocoon. In this log, Farron includes footage from a dissection of a mimic's cocoon, mid-metamorphosis. This dissection offers the clearest look at a mimic I've ever seen, public or private. Most mimic footage I can get my hands on comes from people who have bigger concerns than composition, but this log lingers on the least human characteristics of the mimics. Look, I'm not afraid of the Vita Carnis, and I'd never speak ill of them, but even I can recognize that these things are kind of disgusting. I mean, this flesh cocoon, it's basically a giant open-air placenta. They emerge from this cocoon fully matured, having lost their taste for any meat but the best. It's humans or hunger from then on out. Farron continues sharing the woes of studying mimics in a lab. Since Carcass can't feed them a proper diet, their adults starve quickly. Most of Farron's research has to be done on captured mimics, ones who still have someone's mother or son bubbling away in their digestive juices. Farron tries not to think about that. No sense focusing on the negatives, after all. He's just thankful for any opportunity to research the adults, particularly the ones which present more outwardly human features. The most radical behavioral shift accompanying adulthood is an evolution of their approach to hunting. Lurking in the wilderness isn't especially effective when it comes to hunting humans, forcing mimics to venture into relatively dangerous areas like suburbs and cities. They pick a person and wait for the perfect opportunity to infiltrate their home. Then the mimic will stow away in whatever furniture it can fit itself into, waiting for their prey to be entirely at ease. Only then will the mimic fall back to the more base tactics of its youth: overwhelming violent force, applied liberally, yet precisely. A tremendous amount of information has been published regarding mimics. Some suggest you arm yourselves against them. Others think guns are ineffective. The reality is, if a mimic is hunting you, a gun won't help. Not because they're invincible, but because you won't be given a chance to shoot. They're too cautious to attack, unless they know they can secure a kill. By the time you see the skinned face and pale, bulbous eyes glaring back at you from your cupboard, there's nothing to do but pray it eats you after you're dead. The final confirmation that there's something truly wrong with Farron is his willingness to personally interact with the mimics to deepen his understanding of them. Despite his inexhaustible enthusiasm, Carcass remained firm. Human testing was off the table. Carcass continued fruitlessly like this for 2 years until November of 92, when, while cleaning Singularity V1's chamber, an employee fell from a ladder and broke his leg. Bone split skin, and as he called for help, blood trickled from the wound, ran down his leg, and dripped into the tangle of crawl beneath. The Singularity reacted explosively, filling the room with the red glow that, before, had only pulsed patiently deep within the sphere. That night, a simple accident unexpectedly changed the goal of Carcass's entire operation. That night, they learned the fundamental truth that the family was founded on. The Vita Carnis sustains humanity, but they expect our service in return. Another hidden tape, Foolish Ambitions, comes to us from right after the raid on Facility Zero. Before Carcass handed Simon Vanguard over to the authorities, they first conducted their own interrogation. We see Father Vanguard in a dimly lit room as he's questioned by Carcass agents. The audio's a bit rough, but thank goodness they bring out the ugly, yellow, early 2000s anime fan subtext to help us understand everything. If you've been keeping up with the news, you probably know most of this, but I don't miss an opportunity to talk about Father Vanguard. He took his place as head of our house way before I joined the family. Before that, he was a soldier. More like a war hero, probably. I don't know the details, but somehow he ended up being pretty well connected within the government and New Trier. Much of Carcass's interrogation was aimed at understanding exactly how Father Vanguard made those connections, but under different circumstances, it would have been obvious. I met him once, got to talk to him a little before the whole face thing, and the man just had this, I don't know, this energy that makes you want to listen to him. But yeah, since they chained him up like an animal rather than giving him a fair chance to make his case, Father Vanguard chose to be silent. However, when the unnamed interrogator brings up the meat snake experiments in 1945, something changes. Carcass mentions that something else was hidden in the tunnels. At that, Vanguard finally lifts his face to look at the interrogator. Reading between the lines, I think one of the 7 singularities was kept in the tunnels, then relocated to Facility Zero before terminating its course at Carcass HQ. The interrogator taunts Father Vanguard, asking if he's disappointed that the singularities have been imprisoned by Carcass. Father Vanguard calls them fools for seeing the VC as something to study rather than serve, to dissect rather than devote themselves to. They ask the reason for his reverence, eager to know why Father Vanguard would afflict his face so severely. They ask at last about the visions that Father Vanguard receives from the Vita Carnis. Ultimately, they don't learn much from this interrogation. Father Vanguard becomes aggressive. The interrogation ends, and he's released into government custody. I wasn't aware that his episodes had progressed so far. The video ends with a picture of Father Vanguard taken before his release from Carcass. His nose, lips, and one of his eyes are missing. Self-mutilations, meant to serve the Vita Carnis. I confess, I'm not sure how this helps. There are rumors within the family. A few have even followed in his footsteps, but I don't think I could do that to myself. I know what I should say. Father Vanguard stood by his morals more than anyone else I've ever met, and this family's worse off without him. But honestly, this tape unnerves me. I would advise you, dear viewer, to consult an elder brother or sister to help you understand what I do not. First contact picked up in the midst of the Singularity's meltdown. This tape opens with a morphing, red, organic glow that descends into utter chaos.
All the entities are freaking out. The system can't handle all of this. Turn off the power. Sure, do it.
All 7 singularities behaved in concert, surging with cosmic power. Carcass killed power to their facility, and as the signals crisscrossing Carcass HQ died, the singularities fell silent, like children, lulled to slumber by a spiritless night. Carcass was left trembling, vibrant with fear and anticipation. Systems were hesitantly brought back online, with no indications of another outburst from the singularities. When Carcass finally mustered the courage to enter V1's chamber again, a guard's radio began to malfunction. It produced static, then more distinct sounds, and finally, speech. Dr. Trados was the first to respond to the otherworldly entity.
Can you hear me? Can you understand what I am saying? Can you hear?
Yes.
Holy shit. What now? What should I say?
The singularity speaks in fractured sentences, as though words are being lost in the weakness of the radio signal. The issue is ameliorated with a more powerful radio, but the entity's responses remain ambiguous at best. Dr. Trados continues his conversation with V1.
Can you still hear us?
I
Okay. What are you? Can you explain?
We feel, suffer, thrive, purpose. We are
What are your connections to the Vita Carnis species?
nature, life, nature, pain, figures, dancing, sleep, feel, feed, grow.
Do you know why you are here? Did you hear us?
Curious.
What?
These boxes, devices, they talk.
Are you talking about the radios?
Yes. Catches noise.
Radios transmit and receive waves and translate it into sound.
Can we see more?
Do you want more radios?
His interaction with V1 profoundly changed Trados, and by extension, all of Carcass. He was the first to speak with a member of the Vita Carnis, but he would not be the last. Naturally, others at Carcass were hesitant. Dr. Trados discredited concerns. They were only days away from a visit from the United Nations, and their evaluation of Trados' work would decide the future of Carcass, perhaps the future of the human race. His conversation with V1 was the biggest breakthrough in human history, and he won't jeopardize the Singularity's continued cooperation by denying their desires. In the days following first contact, radios were installed in every containment chamber so researchers could communicate with the Singularities during tests. Testing shifted to examining the Singularity's interactions with electronics, such as radios and televisions, and Carcass began to conceive of the Vita Carnis at a level beyond mere biology. This shift is also reflected in Magister's Wonders, which, on this tape, teaches us about the electromagnetic spectrum rather than the animal kingdom. They learned that the Singularities shared an interest in technology and entertainment. They were captivated by radios, television, and, surprisingly, classical music. Considering that classical music plays in every episode of Magister's Wonders, it's likely that the interference on these tapes is a result of the Singularities intercepting broadcasts that interest them. Carcass's most important discovery was of distinct personalities among the Singularities. V1 would only discuss electronics, while V2 and V4 eagerly asked questions about a wide range of topics. V3 and V5 were especially active, but rarely engaged with researchers, instead speaking primarily to themselves. V6 produced noise, but never speech, and V7 remained silent. Or at least, it pretended to. The most distressing revelation from the radios were the communications between Singularities. Carcass had insulated chambers from the outside world, but the imprisoned entities had been silently communicating with each other all along. While the radios could receive the signals between spheres, the signals were indecipherable. I imagine it must have upset Dr. Trados knowing his test subjects were whispering behind his back. We hear a short conversation between the singularities. After playing with the audio quite a bit, the best I can tell you is that the singularities don't seem confident about their next move. Whatever it is, it will likely involve a Vincent Barrar, the kid who went on the run after publishing classified documents in his class project, the Living Meat Research documentary. Last I knew, he was trying to get in touch with Carcass around the turn of the decade, just before the raid on Facility Zero. If he hadn't helped spread the whole cult narrative, hadn't tried to expose us to the fools at Carcass, the disaster at Facility Zero might never have happened. A lot of well-meaning people are in prison because of Vincent. Whatever the singularities want with him, I doubt he'll like it. When the day finally came for Carcass to present their findings to the United Nations, Dr. Trados led UN representatives to V1's observation room, eager to earn funding to push their experiments even further. They just needed the support of... An alarm blares, interrupting Trados. Panic sets in. What's happening? A containment breach in the Mimic sector? No, this was something closer. Utilizing everything it had learned in the last few days and drawing upon Carcass's considerable technological resources, V1 addressed the representatives and researchers alike, its voice reaching every receiver, emanating from every speaker, shaking the walls like the voice of God. With unforeseen eloquence, it spoke.
There's been much learned in our time together. I agree with Dr. Trados. If we continue, I am sure this will benefit all. Symbiosis. We join together. Let us sow seeds and watch what grows. Divine purpose. Let us show you. Let us guide the way. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. Become one.
That's where the tape ends, with a glorious promise being extended to Carcass. A promise that was supposed to be ours. I haven't severed ties to the family, but I have allowed them to fray. It's easier to hide from the witch hunt happening outside. But what's happening inside of me might be worse. My faith in the spheres is shaken. The hurt only grows, and with it the anger. It was supposed to be Father Vanguard sowing those seeds, not Trados. The family was to water, not Carcass. The devoted were meant to survive, and the rest to starve. So, why? Why would the spheres abandon the family to favor the hateful fools who poke and prod them like common beasts? I'm sorry. I don't want to extend my doubts to anyone else, but I feel lost and there's nowhere else to turn. Who, outside the family, could possibly understand what I'm feeling?
Little brother, what you've shared is deeply troubling. Never confuse this family with some archaic religion. We've no contract, no covenant, no glorious promise. Father Vanguard knows why our enemies treated so amicably, but his son's faith is not founded on knowledge. Serving closely alongside Simon, I have seen that trembling devotion does not arise despite our short-sightedness, but is in fact born of blindness. We must seek utility, not understanding. To that end, I have enclosed several more tapes. Make yourself useful. Review them and prepare another statement for your brothers and sisters. Many depend on your work to help explain our family's present struggle to their children. Ensure that your personal demons do not bleed through to burden the next generation. I will revise what you have sent me, correcting numerous errors, to make it appropriate for circulation. In the meantime, refrain from contacting others in the family. The cure for doubt is devotion without distraction. Focus on your work, and perhaps you shall find the comfort you seek.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, I've been entrusted with another batch of tapes from Carcass HQ, thanks to the brave insiders risking their lives to bring you the truth. This tape, titled Surface of the Waters, contains some especially cryptic footage, even compared to what we've already seen. It opens with a short selection of important observations made in late 1992. Growing Vita Carnis population on the Hudson Bay Island, strange seismic readings near Facility Zero, and intense electronic interference during singularity testing. No conclusions are drawn from the data, but even this short document gives us an idea of what Carcass's priorities were at the end of 1992. They wanted to know more about the singularities, of course, but they were also still interested in Facility Zero years after the raid, suspecting that our island home wasn't chosen at random. The next document on this tape was written in early 1995, more than 2 years after first contact, saying, "Things are getting bad. More new hires are coming in to replace missing personnel. I worry when I will be next." Emmett was right. We should never have continued our work here. They're neglecting even basic procedures now. They're building something. I'll send you what I can. B. Yet again, this message is from the mysterious B, who wrote the secret message in Past Regrets Reaching Out. Whatever issues were making him antsy back in 1994 seem to be getting worse, but now we've got a better idea of who B is. He's a Carcass employee, a researcher, perhaps, who started to wonder if he's working for the good guys after all. In that case, the most pertinent unknown seems to be the identity of the message's recipient. The tape continues, and we're shown a hodgepodge of human features, like an animated skeleton spouting distorted speech. Reversed, it says something along the lines of,
"We thought we were bright. We thought we were smart. We tried to reach for the sky. Now we fall. Now here we lie. We dug too deep. We dug too far. Our ego was the death of us. Now let me hang. Let me down. No mind. Now we drown."
Is this someone in the family? We're the ones who reached for the sky to contact the divine, but fell before we could reach it. But obviously, we weren't motivated by ego. We gave up everything to serve the Vita Carnis. What could be less egotistic than total self-sacrifice? This must be from Carcass, but it bothers me how vague the distinction is becoming. Terminal Rally is the most horrifying tape in the batch. We return to the familiar work of Farron Brones. Before that, however, we get another message from the mysterious B. "I have a request. One of the researchers I know has been missing their progress reports. I knew he would miss a few since he got approval for one of his field projects, but it's been 4 months. I know it isn't my place to ask this of you, but I'm worried. I wouldn't ask you if I wasn't sure something was wrong. I found out where he was researching. Unfortunately, you know the area well. I'll send what information I have. B." Nothing in this message indicates its recipient's identity. It does, however, indicate that the situation inside Carcass is only getting worse. Folks aren't just getting fired anymore, they're going missing, and the latest to vanish is none other than Farron Brones. In the years since his last log, Carcass has relaxed their policies on human testing, and that means it's Farron's time to shine. Farron Brones' big idea was to use himself as human bait, locking himself in an abandoned house and luring in hungry mimics. His plan was simple. Farron rigged a house with motion sensors and microphones, fortified one of its bathrooms, and stocked it with supplies. Then, he did everything you shouldn't do if you want to avoid the attention of a mimic. The entire time Farron is describing the experiment, he just sounds way too excited. Bro is legitimately off his nut, but hey, at least he brought a gun. On the morning of the second day, there's not much that Farron feels is worth noting. He's able to monitor the mimic's movement through the house using a board of blinking lights connected to his network of motion sensors. Well, technically they're baby monitors. Carcass was too cheap to give this poor guy real equipment. So far, The house is completely empty except for Dr. Brown's. In fact, he offhandedly mentions that this entire neighborhood is uninhabited. Few are comfortable living in an area previously targeted by mimics. Early on day 3, Farron wakes up to movement. A light marked entrance flickers to life, then living room. There was finally a mimic in the house. Now that the experiment had truly begun, even Farron must have felt some unease regarding the construction of his barrier. A few boards bolted to the door might keep out a single mimic, but what if there were more? What if there was something worse? Farron turns on a transceiver to listen in on the living room, but as soon as he does, the mimic stops. Everything is completely still for over 2 hours, and Farron begins to have doubts about the accuracy of the readings. Did he scare it away? Did it go into hiding? Perhaps the baby monitors have failed and the experiment needs to be restarted. After 2 more silent hours, Farron decides to do something that is, even by his own admission, stupid. He grabs his gun and opens the door to his sanctuary.
Gun. Just thanks.
The elder mimic never went into hiding, and it never ran. It crept through the darkened halls of the home for more than 4 hours, too slowly to even set off the motion detectors. Infinite patience delivered it to Farron's door, and he found himself cornered by the most violent creature on the planet. Dr. Brown's inexhaustible enthusiasm was officially exhausted. He wanted out. He stayed quiet for 3 days, hoping the elder would think that he left and lose interest. The monitors continue to prove useless. The house was unnaturally silent, without even a creak or groan to hint at the creature's lean, lurking form. It might have left days ago. Farron wouldn't have even known. After 9 days, he finally cracked.
No movement detected. I think it's time. I can't keep staying here. I'm beginning to lose it. I need to leave. I gather my stuff and leave. I need to be careful. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Okay. I've got everything I need. Oh, gun in hand. It's time to go.
The elder mimic had been at his door for 6 days straight, close enough to hear Farron breathe, waiting so quietly that Farron convinced himself that the mimic left. Dr. Brown's locks himself back inside the bathroom and prepares for death. A day goes by, and then another, but the elder never acts. It could unquestionably rip the door from its frame, so why didn't it? Farron mutters to himself as fear and isolation mix to madness. The camera cuts, and when it returns, one of the lights on the board is on. It's moving.
Please stop. I can't. Please. It's been 16 days. I'm tired, but I don't care anymore. I need out. If I go out, guns blazing, I could scare it at least, or maybe even kill it. Then I just run as fast as I can. Then I could possibly make it out. Then I... No.
Having retreated one final time into the relative safety of the bathroom, Farron despairs at having wasted his best chance to run. If he had dashed while the creature was reeling from the gunshot, he believes he might have escaped. In reality, the only imaginable result would have been a doomed chase through the abandoned suburban streets. 17 days into the experiment, Farron becomes convinced that the mimic is listening to him. He reminds himself that he's safe. He knows something it doesn't. After 20 days, Carcus will save him. He only had to spend 3 more days in hell. Then 2, 1, 0. Imagine Farron's pain on the 21st morning, when he finally realized what Carcus was, when vicious truth dawned alongside the sun. There would be no rescue. Carcus had exploited his curiosity and tricked him into documenting his own execution.
It's been 28 days. Food has run out. I know now. I know. I was too dumb to realize. But I haven't figured out. They sent me here to die. I didn't know why, but they did. But I don't think they knew that I would figure it out eventually. I've hid this video recorder so that if they do come, they won't find it. Hopefully someone will. I will leave one last audio log for them. Audio log? It's been 28 days. Oh, he's lost. He waits for me now. He will claim his kill. Soon, probably hears me right now. But I know now. I'm ready. I know he knows. This is it. There you are.
Days later, Farron's body was recovered, every last morsel of meat having been sucked from his bones. The team from Carcus discovered the lone camera beneath the sink, but everything else used in Farron's experiment, such as the baby monitors, backup cameras, and even the remnants of his supplies, were all missing. The video ends with an email. "I'm sorry to say, things are much more dire than expected. Be careful. V." I suspect this V might be Vincent Berrar, who was likely the one in contact with B, and the one who stole Farron's equipment before Carcus got to it. I thought Vincent was working with Carcus, but maybe our enemy across the aisle is having some doubts of his own. Divide and Conquer might be the most cryptic tape in the series. It shows us these strange, almost human skulls. The first has a giant eye in the middle of its face, or perhaps a hole in its head. It reminds me of the monoliths, but others believe that this is the prince of the Vita Carnis. Personally, I don't see any reason to assume that, besides the fact that most of us have never seen the prince. Later in the video, 6 skulls are shown fused together, and the center of the clustered craniums is the symbol of the singularities. Perhaps this represents that the singularities have a unified mind, or that each sphere fuses many minds in one body. In any case, that doesn't seem to be the primary focus of this tape. The rest of the tape appears to be footage from a lab studying the interactions between spiders of varying size. The larger spiders cannibalize their smaller kin, unaware that they're being watched by something smarter, stronger, transcendent. At the moment of attack, their human observer could squash both Eater and E10 with a single move. It's the aggressor that makes both subjects so easy to eradicate. With some distance, the spiders might at least inconvenience the agent of their annihilation, but the observer has carefully selected, supported, and assembled these subjects, one stronger and one weaker, to ensure conflict. The stronger is so focused on the feast, it never considers that once the fatted victor has no kin left to consume, the experiment will end, and both subjects will be unceremoniously eliminated. The family was nurtured for nearly a century by our otherworldly observers, only for a larger, hungrier beast to be introduced to our enclosure. Carcass has proven to be the bigger spider, but what's one last meal if this experiment is about to end? Dire Measures discusses the final 2 species of Vita Carnis housed in Carcass HQ, the hosts and harvesters. Before the research logs, however, we see one final message from B.
I don't know how much time I have. I think they're beginning to realize what I'm doing. I've sent over one last package containing anything I thought looked important. If I don't contact you again, assume the worst. I know how hard it is to combat this alone again, but I don't think we have a choice. You figured it out before. You can do it again before it's too late. Good luck to you.
At this rate, I don't think we'll ever deduce B's identity, but I'd rather Carcass not patch the leak most of this footage is coming from. If one mysterious messenger is the price we pay for truth, so be it. The tape continues, and we learn that Carcass stole the host of influence that the family had been keeping at Facility Zero. I think it's probably one of the ones that served as the heart of our flavor enhancer operation. They also found samples of 3 distinct powders in the facility. Before you get too excited, it was just a vial of host spores, a vial of flavor enhancer, and a third vial which contained some previously unstudied variant of host spores. Carcass quickly set to work testing the host of influence and the effects of its spores on humans. Notably, this highly classified research was conducted in 1991, shortly after the raid on Facility Zero. When they told Farron Brones that they refused to perform human testing, they were lying. Carcass had been running experiments with human subjects since the very beginning. To evaluate the host's abilities, researchers placed it in a room alongside a human subject, a man named Leto Dolus. The room was divided by a barrier which permitted the passage of spores without allowing direct contact between the subjects. After inhaling the spores, Leto was quarantined until the effects of exposure wore off, and he was instructed to record his experiences while under the host's influence. The first trial initially produced mild respiratory irritation, but once Leto was placed under quarantine, he quickly descended into a fugue state that lasted nearly 2 days, before giving way to a small range of lingering effects.
I feel tired, and I have aches in my legs and arms. I'm also quite nauseous. Not dizzy, but foggy, if that makes sense. I don't feel too bad overall. The worst I feel is very hungry and thirsty.
He reports dim, blurry vision and an ever-present ringing in his ears, like the external world faded away, leaving only the unconscious urge to return to the host. At no point did he recall the end goal, only the inexplicable compulsion to leave his room. 2 days later, the test was repeated. This time, Leto aggressively attempted to escape quarantine until the spore's influence waned. From the written report, we learned that he hallucinated whispering and flashes of light during quarantine, but perhaps even more concerning were the lingering symptoms he described in the second verbal report.
I'm exhausted now. My joints feel tight, and my muscles as well. There's a slight tremor in my fingers, and I'm very disoriented. And my head is pounding. I'm also seeing silhouettes, and my vision is, I don't know, like if you looked at a light for too long and it gets burned into your vision. I'm getting better though. I think I should be fine to continue.
That should likely have marked the end of Carcass's experiments with this particular subject, but they continued. In the third test, the host of influence welcomed Leto into the chamber with a surprising calmness. In contrast, researchers were forced to interrupt the quarantine phase of this trial when Leto's escape efforts grew too desperate. The photo attached to this report shows an injury on his head from repeated impacts against his cell door.
It feels numb It's not bad. It doesn't hurt. I don't think so, at least. I remember something. I can't pin it, though. Like remembering a dream. It was bright. It was nice. I felt it's important.
At Leto's own prompting, rising concerns about the permanent effect of the spores were set aside and testing continued. The fourth trial introduced an unexpected variable. The host's spores were different, significantly more red in hue than the standard orange spores observed during every previous trial. My guess is that these are the same spores found in the mysterious third vial recovered from Facility Zero. Leto was once again moved into quarantine and restrained so as not to accidentally injure himself. After another 36 hours of struggle, Leto's final report was recorded.
I see it. It is dark, but a light so beautiful. I devote myself to the great truth, to stray from darkness and meet the light. For wonder and wisdom, I serve my Lord. I serve my Lord. I serve my Lord. I serve my...
The written report isn't much of a report. Instead, Leto has simply sketched 3 crowned figures: father, mother, and child. The host spores didn't break Leto's mind. They opened it to the experience which inspired Simon Vanguard to such transformative sacrifice. The spores showed him something real that rests beyond the horizon of our world. Perhaps the influential power of the spores lies not with the host itself, but in the interdimensional audience they grant with distant, ultimate authority. The prince, king, and queen ruling us from afar through the Vita Carnis. The second half of this tape is devoted to the results of more modern research. In mid-1995, Carcus was seeking a means to extract the twin venoms that make harvesters so deadly. As a reminder, harvester tentacles are lined with 2 rows of parallel barbs, one side that injects a neurotoxin to paralyze prey, and one that injects a potent anticoagulant to accelerate bleeding. Part of why the government takes harvesters so seriously is they don't know how to counteract both venoms at once. Even rapid treatment usually fails to save the victim of a harvester attack. It's certainly plausible that Carcus would have been set to studying these venoms in search of a cure, but as we'll see, that wasn't the extent of their experimentation. They planned to provoke an attack from the harvester with a sponge to soak up the venom, but when the bulbous beast proved too aggressive, the idea had to be scrapped. They ultimately opted to sedate the harvester and gather the venom by hand, a dangerous approach considering the sedative might wear off earlier than expected, but staff encountered no such obstacle. This method bore consistent fruit, which meant the only impediment to application was Carcus's creativity. The harvester report is then interrupted by an interrogation.
Carcus has been hemorrhaging sensitive information for years, and the time has come for them to patch their leak.
Hey, why am I tied up? What's going on? Hey!
Sit still, Bruce. It's all right.
Dr. Trados, why am I here?
Calm yourself. We're just going to ask a few questions.
The man being questioned is Bruce Phoenix, who, regrettably, we know as the Mysterious Bee. Bruce is the head of Carcus's files department, which explains how he was able to leak documents from every research sector at Carcus. Bruce denies most of this, but he's dug a deep hole for himself that's hard to climb out of. Impossible, with Trados standing at the rim, watching him from above. I'll admit, I admire Bruce Phoenix. Even if he contributed to the fall of the family, he stuck to his morals and turned against Carcus when he saw that they were changing. Most of what I've shared, I wouldn't even have without the risks this man has taken. And that's part of what makes the next part of this tape so hard to watch. Bruce can count on, at the very least, being arrested for corporate sabotage or even treason. With little left to lose, he makes himself fully known. He tells Trados that what Carcus has been doing, serving the Vita Carnis, is wrong. He claims that the singularities are altering Trados and the others, clouding their judgment and influencing their decisions. He says that Trados and Carcus are becoming monsters, just like Simon Vanguard and the rest of the cult. Trados demands that Bruce disclose the identity of his contact, but he refuses to sell out Vincent, especially now that he's Bruce's only means of resisting Carcus. Resolve is written all over Bruce's face, so Trados gives up on extracting answers. And with that, the worst possible outcome for Bruce becomes a reality.
Cut the cameras.
Have you watched some of the tapes of the experiments we do? It's interesting, some of the things in there. Did you know in harvesters that both of the venoms they inject are lethal? The neurotoxin doesn't just block the nerve signals, it directly attacks each nerve, causing sudden paralysis in muscles, moving deeper into your vitals. But for each nerve that dies, you feel every single thing. But all you can do is sit in silence as your nerves burn away until your heart stops beating, your lungs stop breathing, and your brain shuts down. Fortunately, usually the other venom causes you to bleed out first. Sir, what are you doing? Fortunate indeed. Sir, please. No, please don't. Don't! Please don't! No! I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Marshal. No! Please!
Brother, I am so full of hate and doubt. The more I see of Carcus, the more I detest them. And the more I see that they are just like us. Am I to be repulsed by Trados and inspired by Father Vanguard, even as their resemblance magnifies with each tape? The comparison might once have bred kinship with Carcus, but instead it undermines my world with new questions. Questions I cannot ask, since those I once loved grow more distant by the day. Was it you who asked them to abandon me? And they listened. Have we believed the wrong truth? You, I, and the rest? And the family really is the cult the world claims we are? Mindless devotees to destruction. I want to stay loyal. My brothers and sisters are more important to me than anything. But what good is loyalty without truth?
Peter, when I sent you these tapes, I expected you to be encouraged by the devotion your new brothers at Carcus have demonstrated. Surely you see that we were never abandoned. The singularities merely adopted Trados' flock into our family. We are animals, Peter. Flesh, bone, and blood, suffering in the dirt until something stronger recognizes our real value as nourishment. Good is beyond a man's mind to understand. A walking meal cannot grasp true morality. But this is not beyond the Vita Carnis. What is ultimately good is for the hungry tongue of the cosmos to lap our stain of a species from the surface of this planet and metabolize it into something greater. I forbade the others from speaking to you because I could not allow doubt, that most venomous of all earthly toxins, to spread among the precious, faithful few that remain. We must be careful not to let these misgivings rob you of the home we now must share with those we once condemned. This family is changing, Peter, and I would have you prove your devotion to the new way by following Vanguard's sacrifice and marking your face as he did. It is difficult for us, as animals, to sacrifice our appearance and reject our ego, but that is precisely what infuses the scars with such transcendent beauty. They are a symbol that we serve man no longer. Claim the noble alienage into which we all seek adoption, Peter.
A crown is before you in every blade.
All you must do is wear it.
Screw that. It's been months since I got that letter, and it still makes me mad. If I'd received that letter a few years earlier, I might have gone through with it. But after what I've seen, after being left in the dark with my doubts for months, this letter gave me the encouragement I needed to emancipate myself from the cult entirely. I've found so much more than Emmett would ever have been willing to share with me, if he's even still alive. I'm still not sure how to get this into your hands yet, brothers and sisters, but listen to me. The family truly is a cult. I've destroyed most materials that would get me arrested, but I've got one last look inside Carcass to share with you, and trust me, the final tape is an earthshaker. If the media's got their hands on any of the footage I'm about to share with you, they don't have a clue what to do with it. It leaves many questions, but one undeniable answer. Vincent Barrar, he's important. To Carcass, to the cult, and to the Vita Carnis. The future of our species rests on his shoulders. This video, Futile Attempts to Overcome, contains some of the creepiest imagery on any of the tapes. Reversing it, we watch the horrors of Vincent's life play out at warp speed. We're repeatedly shown versions of this image, which seems to be a crude recreation of the family photo from the species anomaly report that leaked half a decade ago. You probably remember that as the video where a mother and child were killed by a harvester. You may not have been aware, however, that that was Vincent's mother and younger brother. This tape shows us a stylized depiction of their deaths, and the family photo changes to reflect each loss. After the division of their family, Vincent and his father were alone in a world that suddenly seemed much more dangerous. Unfortunately, it turned out to be even more dangerous than they feared. In a sequence of red flashes, we're shown a mimic sneaking into the Barrar's mobile home, followed by a photo of the gored remains of Vincent's father. In just a few short years, Vincent lost everything to the Vita Carnis. He was alone, but the Vita Carnis weren't finished with him. Clearing up and reversing the audio from this video, I can uncover what I believe to be a hidden message to Vincent from the Singularities. It's incredibly hard to make out, but I'm going to play it for you, and then I'll tell you what I think it says.
It's all your fault. They suffered because of you. It was your responsibility. You failed to appear. You should have been capable. Now you're next. It's too late.
There's more in there that I can't understand, so you're welcome to extract a more accurate transcript. In any case, the only meaning I can draw out of this message is that the Singularities are taunting Vincent, setting the blame for his family's death at his feet. They tell him that, just like his family, he'll be killed and consumed by the Vita Carnis, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. But why would they say this? What value is there for the spheres in tormenting Vincent with undue guilt? More than that, why taunt him if they plan to kill him like anyone else? This is one of those videos that leaves us with more questions than answers. Our only hope is to push forward. I'm going to cheat on the order here a little bit. This last bit of hidden footage is technically the most recent footage that I've received, but it's very short. It collects pages of a storybook the cult made back in the day. To briefly recap for anyone not familiar, it tells the story of a prince who was separated from his royal family in a storm and fell into a deep sleep on an island. Weaker beings called critters found the prince sleeping. Some critters cared for the prince, feeding him despite being in the midst of a famine themselves. When he finally woke up, the prince used his magic to end the famine. He then left the island to return to his family, but promised to return with the king and queen to help them more one day. The island is Earth, humans are the critters, and the prince's magic is the Vita Carnis. I guess it isn't so obvious for anyone outside of Neutrier or Carcass, but back when people started getting their hands on this stuff, some people thought that the singularity was the prince. Can you believe that? They actually thought there was only one singularity. Anyway, I haven't been able to track down a full copy of the storybook. Cult materials are highly regulated, and I don't want to end up on any lists, so unfortunately this is the clearest view of each page I can get you. The worst part is that this last page is incomplete. Best I can tell, it appears to confirm that the prince succeeded in returning across the cosmos to the rest of the royal family. We see him bowing, asking for help like he promised us, but I can't tell much else. We're left to guess at the king's response until I can get my hands on a full copy, and we're left to wonder how much of this took place in the past, and how much is prophetic. Necrotic Wound, the final tape in my possession, begins with a series of news broadcasts revealing that the Vita Carnis have become more central to society than ever. No one is interested in resistance, and the Vita Carnis are running wild now that Carcass isn't fighting back. Even at the peak of our influence, the Neutrier cult had nothing on this. Speaking of, another bit of information that we learned from these broadcasts is that Simon Vanguard has escaped from police custody and is currently on the run. Might have cheered for that once. Aside from that, we also learned that our environment is spiraling. Earthquakes, forest fires, and air pollution are all on the rise. After the last news broadcast, we're shown the final progress report Bruce Phoenix passed along to Vincent. It summarizes research performed in June of 1995, the latest research so far. Carcass has continued their experiments with every species of Vita Carnis except, notably, the singularities. As we'll see, those have taken on a new position within the organization.
Highlights from this document include the startling revelation that years after Leto Dolus' death, Carcass is still performing human experiments with host spores. It's unclear how many they've sacrificed in this manner, but their choice to repeat the experiment after what it did to Dolus, even once, proves how little human life ever mattered to Carcass.
Further research has shown the Vita Carnis to be entirely uninterested in consuming or competing with each other. However, Carcass has also determined that the Vita Carnis are not a connected hive mind, disproving a popular theory both inside the cult and out. Strangely, the most sensitive information relates to abnormal crawl samples. That seems like it would be of relatively little concern considering Carcass's other secrets, but we'll soon learn why Trados thinks it's so important. The final communication from Bruce also contains maintenance reports from Carcass HQ and Facility Zero. There's been an increase in seismic activity and wild VC population at Carcass HQ, the exact same phenomenon observed around Facility Zero 3 years prior. The singularities have begun to subtly direct Carcass, telling them to expand their facility and suggesting the termination of several underperforming employees and researchers. I suspect that the singularities devised the plot to dispose of Dr. Farron Brones, and I fear that other researchers may have met similar ends. Finally, the singularities recommend a delay on building inspections for 3 months. There's something they don't want anyone to see, but it's going to be ready within a matter of weeks. The tape continues to a voice log from Alpha Team Leader, recorded immediately after the raid on Facility Zero. The mission went smoothly. There were no friendly casualties, they apprehended several high-ranking members of the cult, and they accomplished all of Carcass's objectives easily. But that's the problem. He's concerned that the mission went too smoothly, like the cult wanted Carcass to acquire the singularity. His anxieties are accredited only minutes later when we're shown a letter addressed to Marshal Trados. It reads,
"It has come to our attention that you have managed to achieve something great. We understand that our previous interactions have not been ideal. We are willing to move past our conflicting past and move forward in light of this new achievement. And what an achievement it is indeed. Your facility managed to do what we spent the entirety of our assembly's lifetime dedicated to in a matter of 2 years. We've underestimated you again. We understand that you have had the honor of communicating to the entities themselves. How blessed you are to be in the presence of such greatness. You've seen it too, haven't you? They've shown you their divine will, the great plan. We know you are assisting them in construction of their tools, and we would be honored to give our full, complete support and fidelity. For we both follow the will of the Master. We are happy to once again work towards this common goal together. For wonder and wisdom, we serve our Lord."
At the bottom of this letter is my family's seal, perhaps better known as New Trier Co.'s logo or simply the symbol of the cult. Carcass's adoption into the family is official, but New Trier says they're happy to work together again. That at least suggests the possibility that my own estranged family may have established Trados as the head of Carcass and orchestrated the raid on Facility Zero to extend their web of influence farther than ever before. It was all about bringing the Vita Carnis to light as the story's hero rather than its shadowed villain. We were never Carcass and cult. We were all family, all along. That's when, finally, we see what the Singularities have been planning. Schematics for an unholy fusion of meat and machinery. 3 devices, a satellite, a gateway, and the keystone, which work in concert to bring something very distant to our doorstep. Central to the construction of these 3 devices is the crawl, presumably the abnormal, classified crawl mentioned in the previous research summary. Illustrations below the gateway depict gravity warping and tearing to form a channel across space, a bridge between our planet and the king, queen, and prince. The plans are set in place, assembly is underway, and our world seems set to serve as the stage for 3 heroes far more horrific than the Vita Carnis.
That's why, armed with information and hungry for hope, Vincent Barrar devotes himself to the destruction of Carcass.
Everything we see from here out comes either from Vincent or was otherwise recovered from Carcass HQ. What's left of it, anyway. Without Bruce, Vincent was forced to find his own way past Carcass security. Remotely, he's unable to access much beyond a list of employees. Farron Brones, Bruce Phoenix, and Minerva Janus, all of whom have been terminated. A list of planned terminations, no doubt suggested by the Singularities, includes Rhodes Serres, Fawn Penitro, and Azrim Griffiths, the heads of crawl, trimming, and meat snake research, respectively. Several new Trier members are being hired to replace those terminated, allowing Trados to learn about the VC without educating anyone outside the family, while also setting the stage with sympathetic actors. You might notice that Carcass's newest data engineer seems somewhat familiar, because it's Vincent Barrar in disguise. He joins the other new hires at Carcass HQ in August, just 1 month before the Singularity's deadline. We're shown footage inside Carcass HQ, where a senior employee who is training Vincent is interrupted by another researcher. He's led away, and he tells Vincent to stay put for a moment. Obviously, Vincent immediately slinks off into the facility to the file storage room, where Bruce Phoenix used to work. There, he begins to tear through boxes, scattering papers about the floor, before we finally see him exiting the room. Smoke begins to seep through the cracks about the filing room door as the documents go up in flames, and an alarm starts to blare throughout the facility. Researchers rush to extinguish the fire, but Vincent uses the distraction to reach Observation Room 1, where Trados first spoke with the Singularities. Vincent breaches a computer in the room, at which point the spheres lock down the entirety of Carcass HQ. All 7 Singularities begin to address Vincent directly. They tell Vincent that, while others might find him irritating, they look beyond what is to see what could be. They see his potential. They see the way he crawls and writhes and continues to live despite being tormented by the Vita Carnis all his life. They tell him that he's different from the rest of humanity. The others only want something to follow, but Vincent, he struggles. He fights back. He acts. They respect him, but they also tell him that he had no choice from the very beginning. They knew that Vincent would come to destroy Carcass. They counted on it. Carcass and the cult, they never understood. The Vita Carnis didn't want blind servants. They tell Vincent that all the others exhausted their worth, but Vincent's passion has spared him. We see a map of the facility as the singularities open every single door between Vincent and freedom, while keeping every member of Carcass trapped inside the facility. They tell Vincent to continue to feed them, but I don't think they mean it literally. They don't want nutrition. They want inspiration. They want Vincent to lead and follow, to finally fulfill the symbiotic bond they've been seeking. Then they cease communications entirely. Throughout the facility, the Vita Carnis begin to defy gravity, floating into the air before breaking down into tiny chunks of meat. Every species disassembles itself at a cellular level, all except for the singularities, who are ready to receive that which the other Vita Carnis offer up. Outside, a helicopter circles Carcass HQ as a reporter tries but fails to explain the unfolding horror. A single red sphere emerges from the rising smoke, followed by 6 more. The singularities orbit one another, spinning faster and faster until they blur together into a ring of light. 2 massive meat snakes are ripped from the ground beneath Carcass, rising to join the meat maelstrom. The singularities absorb the Vita Carnis and build a new body from their biomass, rising on enormous wings like a giant moth. We cut from one calamity to another as the 7 monoliths drudge through Hudson Bay, having uprooted themselves and begun moving toward the mainland. The sight is outright apocalyptic. Evacuations are called across the nation as the stomping feet of the monoliths bring an end to entire cities. Handheld footage from across Canada reveals that as the Dorito Dragon passes overhead, it seems to shed some sort of scales across the landscape. These could be something similar to host spores, but they also seem to cause electronic interference as feeds glitch and fade as soon as this new creature passes overhead. The monoliths march to meet with the singularities, and as they near one another, there's a massive explosion, possibly from a missile. However, as we saw with the cow in New Beginnings, the singularities prefer dead meat anyway. The exploded flesh of the monoliths is absorbed into the singularity's new body, and a monstrosity, which mankind could scarcely comprehend, rises from the darkness of the devastated landscape, crowned with enormous bony fingers. The tape ends with the Magister emerging one final time. He thanks us for watching and invites us to tune in again to see more of this world's wonders. And that's all the footage I've got. For my analysis of everything we've looked at, I want to update my timeline of the series so far, examine a handful of theories from myself and the community, and give my latest predictions about where this world is heading. I hope that by feeding you the truth, I might energize you to act. The earliest event is the Prince's stranding on our planet, but even with everything we've learned from this newest batch of tapes, it's impossible to infer how long ago this happened. We do know that the Prince was discovered sometime around 1930. With the emergence of the Vita Carnis 60 years ago, humanity lost the cosmic ignorance that united our ancestors. We were hungry, desperate, and easily divided. Most were afraid of this new, unknown entity, but a few sympathized with its sorry state and wanted to help the Prince. That minority became the founders of the family, which, even back then, was founded on sacrifice. However, the earliest servants simply fed the Prince whatever scraps they could spare, going hungry so the star-sent child wouldn't have to. It was a far less insidious sort of sacrifice than we've seen from the family in our lifetimes. When the Prince finally awoke in 1931, he promptly disappeared and the singularities emerged. Through them came the rest of the Vita Carnis, save for the monoliths, which wouldn't appear for another 40 years or so. Those who were starving could suddenly put Crawl on their table, but of course the helpful Crawl wasn't the singularity's only creation. The few who fed the prince continued to act and grow in the shadows. However, rather than serving the prince, they now started serving his creations. Perhaps the beginning of the family's downfall was then when we misplaced our faith. To put this point in terms of a pre-Vita Carnis religion, serving the Vita Carnis is a bit like elevating angels to the throne of God, a confused identification of deity. It was never the prince's intentions for his creations to be worshipped, and the spreading heresy led to all manner of aberrant morality. Almost 15 years after the discovery of the Vita Carnis, our exodus from orthodoxy became evident with the discovery of the massive meat snake in 1945. It was the beginning of a spiral in which our family rapidly grew in both influence and depravity. Soon, our experiments wouldn't end with the dead. 25 years ago, in 1970, Vita Carnis populations spiked, followed by the unprecedented appearance of the monoliths a year later in 1971. The family is not forthcoming about whether or not we chose Facility Zero before or after the arrival of the monoliths, but I suspect that we moved in after them. We are nothing if not followers, after all. The explosive VC population led to a battle of narratives in the 1970s and 80s, as New Trier struggled to establish trust in the monsters in spite of their diet. During this time, Vincent Barrar's family was whittled away, and unsavory incidents such as the cannibal killing of Christopher and Janice Grady were combated with cover-ups. The cult leveraged government ties to perpetuate the lie that the Vita Carnis did more good than harm, even though they had long outlived their usefulness to our species. New Trier began to lose control, however. In 1986, a state of emergency was declared as mimic attacks grew too numerous to ignore. I think this was the start of a process that eventually led to the creation of Carcass. Unable to keep the Canadian people docile, New Trier instead opted for confusion. Do you fight back or not? Is it safer to cower in your home to prevent becoming a target, or is isolating yourself the very thing that makes you the target of a mimic? As the public was flooded with possibilities, the average citizen became increasingly incapable of avoiding a mimic attack. In 1989, a group of researchers, likely a primordial form of Carcass, noted that a significant harvester population was migrating towards Facility Zero. Around that same time, Vincent Barrar began working on the Living Meat research documentary, one of the first independent studies on the Vita Carnis and one of the least influenced by the cult. New Trier started to understand just how much they were losing their grip on the narrative, and so they brought out the nuclear option. Their approach was layered. To maintain control through the power of suggestion, they needed to make their suggestion a little more powerful and the people a little more suggestible. In 1990, Flavor Enhancer hit store shelves. The resultant chemically induced devotion served two purposes. Under the influence of the host spores, the populace accepted the Vita Carnis more than ever, welcoming them into their cities, their businesses, and even their homes. Additionally, it had damaging health effects that were impossible to ignore. The cult became what the public had decided that they were, while they, in the shadows, maneuvered Marshal Trados into a place at the head of Carcass. They would play hero and villain alike to achieve the Singularity's goals. Meanwhile, Vincent began to act against the Vita Carnis in earnest, reaching out to Carcass in message, unaware that the highest echelons of the organization were in league with the family he hoped to fight against. In secret, New Trier orchestrated their own fall at Facility Zero in 1991. They would allow the Singularities to pass from the clutches of Simon Vanguard and his cult and into the grasp of Marshal Trados and Carcass. A sleight of hand which secured more widespread support than the family had ever before enjoyed. Father Vanguard's reaction in the aftermath of the raid was likely genuine. I suspect he was kept out of the loop by the other higher-ups to make his performance more believable, a sacrifice to their story. Publicly, Carcass made little progress, but from the raid in 1991 to their destruction in 1995, they were privately conducting unethical tests with host spores and harvester venom. It wasn't until first contact at the end of 1992 that Carcass could share any significant findings, and from that point, their influence exploded. Trados devoted himself to serving the Singularities, and Carcass gestated into a newer, more perfect model of the family. In September of 1994, the disappearance and death of Farron Brones provoked Bruce Phoenix to action. He finally responded to Vincent's plea from years prior and began sending Vincent sensitive documents exposing Carcass's corruption. Together, they planned to take Carcass and the cult down in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, it took less than a year for Carcass to identify Bruce as a mole, and he was personally executed by Marshal Trados sometime before August of 95. Seeing that his resources were running out, Vincent departed on a doomed mission to destroy Carcass, only to find an unlikely ally in the Singularities. They saw his potential and supported his mission, and he inspired them to abandon Carcass and the cult in favor of a single man. With any situation so opaque as ours, there's bound to be speculation, some good and some bad. Firstly, I want to say that I've begun to move away from an understanding of the Vita Carnis as a militaristic force. Once, I assumed that the Singularity was something like a top-ranking general. Now that we've heard them speak and gotten an idea of their personalities, one emotion seems to define the Vita Carnis above all others: curiosity. The Vita Carnis are incredibly interested in learning about us, our world, and our technology. I've grown increasingly inclined to view the Vita Carnis as researchers, which, unfortunately, makes us their experiment. Comparing the Vita Carnis chain of command to Carcass, I believe that the Prince holds a position akin to Marshal Trados, overseeing the Vita Carnis as a whole. His father, the King, fulfills the same role as the government. He created the Prince, just as the government created Carcass. That would make the Singularities the chief scientists who personally perform the experiments, while also delegating research to those under them. The Trimmings collect information on the subjects, that's us, while the Crawl, Meat Snakes, Mimics, Harvesters, and Hosts serve to push us into circumstances that the Singularities want to study. I don't know exactly what they hope to learn. They may aim to accelerate our advancement by imperiling us, or they may be feeling out the limits of human devotion. Whatever end the Prince has in mind, I suspect it shall be painful. I should note that we still aren't certain who pinned this conspiracy against the human race. Is it the Singularities themselves, or the distant Prince? Many once theorized that the Singularity was the Prince, but that theory seemed disproven by the confirmation of 6 additional Singularities. The Prince is undeniably a lone entity, not a collective, so the Singularities must be its servants, right? Well, with the latest episode, the Singularities have converged into a single entity, one top with a crown. The Prince's identity hangs primarily on a single question. Is the flying Vita Carnis a return to the true form of the Singularities? Or is this something entirely new? If the Singularities were originally one being that split itself apart, perhaps they really are the Prince. That leads to one big problem, however. Carcass HQ was home to several devices built with the Singularities' assistance. The Satellite, Keystone, and Gateway were likely intended to be the Prince's path back home. With Carcass personnel all dead, who's supposed to operate these machines, assuming they weren't destroyed? I see 2 distinct possibilities for where things might go from here. First, let's assume the merged Singularities are the Prince. In this scenario, it seems like we're living through the last pages of the cult's storybook. The Prince wants to bring the King and Queen to Earth, likely via the Gateway, but seems to have set himself back by decades by discarding his human servants.
Unless, of course, they were never meant to survive this step in the plan. Maybe, when the Singularities said that Carcass and the cult had used up their worth, they meant that there was nothing they could do that the Prince couldn't do himself via his magic.
The Singularities still hold immense power over the Vita Carnis, and in the coming months, we may start to see them taking on new roles. Mimics operating machinery, Crawl controlling computers, Trimmings continuing to be useless, that sort of thing. If this comes to pass, then we're as screwed as ever. I don't see anything we can do against the united might of the Prince and his family. On the other hand, if the Singularities aren't the Prince, their destruction of the Gateway starts to look a lot like treason. They massively delayed the Prince's arrival and jeopardized a plan nearly a century in the making. Why? I've mentioned that the Singularities seem inspired by Vincent Barrar. Admiration earned by his refusal to blindly follow. Perhaps, after 60 years of being worshipped, the Singularities began to question their own devotion to the prince and his family. Considering that the Singularity's final form is wearing a crown, they may be seeking a spot on the stage they were told merely to set, and they may be planning to rebel against the prince, king, and queen, just as Vincent rebelled against his earthly authorities. The truth may even lie between both theories, and we're seeing the young prince buck against the will of his parents. Whatever this being's identity may be, it is the greatest danger our species will ever know. We likely cannot survive the midst of this mutiny. Creator and creation at war with each other, conflict on a biblical scale. However, in this divide lies our last shot at salvation. Vincent Barrar has torn a tiny rift in the Vita Carnis hierarchy, and these cosmic gods are distracted, their eyes off us and upon each other. Our weapons are weak, and we've no strong strike to deliver. But for the first time in over 60 years, light has split the endless darkness. Their backs are turned and the abyss is open.
Brothers, sisters, we are entering uncharted waters. I don't think anyone can perfectly predict where this ship is headed, but we're all in the same boat. You and I, brothers and sisters, along with Barrar and whatever stragglers may have survived the disaster at Carcass. The ultimate point I want to make to you, my final plea, is this. Whether we wanted it or not, we've stepped into a war with the Vita Carnis on Earth. We can't afford another war with each other. It's what they want, to keep us killing each other, fighting to be the stronger spider. But this environment was hours before their experiment. Help me right the wrongs our family has committed. Pass my message along to another, and let us seek hope, even if the search only serves to prove that we are fools. Your brother, Peter.
Thanks for reading.
Hello?
Hey, Paul, did you see that thing Brother Crow sent out?
Yeah, I know, it's, pretty concerning stuff. I'm not sure what we should do about it, but...
Why are you breathing so heavy?
I'm just, busy.
Huh. Well, anyways, do you want to start a podcast?
Yeah,